established a temple, the temple of Baal in Hemmitt. Now, what happened was, after the Hyksos were kicked out, the pharaohs knew, people of Hemmitt knew that it was a time that they couldn't be just a people of just intellectual learning, that they were forced into the Imperial Age. They would have to go to war, not just go to war just to take over people's land, but just to secure Hemmitt. So, and remember I told you that they didn't do anything outside of religion. Nothing. Everything they did it inside of the religion. So what they had to do is, because their God is not a God of war, but they have a God that's a principle inside of their pantheon that is a God of war, then what they had to do was they had to balance Set beside Amun-Ra or beside Horus. They had to balance him off, and this would take them into war just to secure. Now I want to get into one thing about these different pantheons. You keep that right now. What happened is, you got a lot of people saying, well, damn, they worship all them pagan gods, and there's a whole bunch of gods and all, but they didn't understand. If you get Wallace Budge from Fetish to God, this book here was written the last year of his life. He said in the first chapter, the first 1 or 2 pages, he said that it was 15 years before when I wrote Gods of the Egyptian, and 15 years later, I found out that I was wrong the whole time, that it was monotheistic from the beginning. It's just that they understood that there were different aspects of God, and God was a vast God, and he had different natures, different components, and when you put them all together like a jigsaw puzzle, it represented one. You understand? But Asa here, he was talking to Listavelt Middleton on the, what's the name of that? What's the name of the show? For the People. Right. He was talking to Listavelt, and Listavelt asked him, he said, well, I want to ask you a question. Because I know that we're taking this from a biblical concept of why we would think that polytheism would be wrong. He said, let's just think, okay, you said that it was monotheistic, and it had different components, different principles, and the gods represented principles. He said, so what about if it was polytheism? Would that be wrong? And they said, he said, no, not necessary. And then you get some people arguing, well, how can you remember all them gods? I want to ask you something. You can take one brother out here. He can remember 20 basketball teams, 20 football teams. So you got 34 pantheons, 34 gods. He can remember 20 basketball teams, 20 football teams, 20 baseball teams. Remember all the players, not only the players that play on the starting lineup, the players that sit on the bench, whether they play 500 ball or not, and know the whole schedule and can tell you the schedule 10 years back about who won the championship in 1986 on back to 69. Then he could tell you 200 songs, 200 artists that wrote the songs and made the songs, who produced the songs. You mean to tell me you can't learn 1737 people? You see how we've been, we can learn all this foolishness. And these people, this was the primary force of these people. God was everything. You mean to tell me from birth on up, they couldn't learn 37 gods and their principles and everything that's related to them? You see? So, the concept of God was monotheistic all the time. It had several principles. And this is called the knowledge of God. Remember I said that the God of Kemet was the God of knowledge, and those principles represented science. And this is the knowledge of God. And any God that's just one God, the spook God, is the ignorant God. It's a God with no characteristics. And the characteristics of God is this fella set. This fella, when you're talking about a God with no characteristics. But then again, when we look at the characteristics of the God that we are, a God of fire and brimstone, and a God of, he's an unapproachable God. You can't even deal with him. He's a intolerant God. He's a God that, sanctions slavery. He's a God of thunder and a God of lightning. You see, a jealous God, right? A jealous God. That's spookism. That's why our brothers and sisters out here are scared to death. You see what I mean? Just the thought of me sitting up here talking about God A God that you can't even say his name. And a God, if you even see the face of him, you'll die. But Moses go up and see the face of him and come back down with 10 commandments that he got from Kemet. You see? But he's a jealous God. You know, all this. A spook God. But this was the Asiatic concept. See, they had the fear of xenophobic attitude, and they had a fear of their own existence, a fear of the woman, a fear of God, a fear of other people like them, a fear of nature. So they said that, man, I'm just wrong for even being here. I must be a sinner. You see? Because they didn't have a damnation or sin. How can you be finished before you even get going? You know what I'm saying? And in that case, we're exempt from all this bull jive. Because we know that half of our lives are based on some defect down the street, and we could have been much better people. And all. So we're exempt from this. If we go into hell for, say, okay, look, this judgment then, I say, okay, stand up before God. Bobby, you did this. You stole, you did all of this and all this here. And I go, well, guess what, though? My name is Bobby Hemmitt, and I'm standing before you in the vessel of an African. But my mind is a European. So I'm exempt from that. You see? So we can't go to hell no way. Because a lot of us don't even know who we are. You see? But for much whom is given, much is required. You see? And that's why I say it's not important to learn the pharaohs so you can get to the corporate board parties that they have. And because they sitting up talking about I'm from England and part of my family's from Ireland, and you go, oh, I was a pharaoh. See, that's just to please white people. And that's what the knowledge has come to. Because I know brothers and sisters that started out with me, and because it ain't financially, you know, suitable, oh man, that's black insanity too, man. You reading all them books all the damn time, you know what I mean? You know, and I got a cousin, I went home, my cousin, I got a cousin, she just got out of University of South Carolina. We was home for my grandmother's, my grand aunt, my great aunt's funeral, and she was 94. That lets you know she's a god there, you know, beat down all her life and still defy the odds. And all, and eating all that pork and anything else you put in her mouth and all. And we know we can't do that these days because they used to work hours in the sun and walk all the way to school and walk this and stuff. So they would sweat out half that stuff. And I saw a woman, but she came in the store, she was like, hey, this is what she said, I want a ham and cheese with bacon. And I said, damn, you got cars on top of cars. I don't want to hear that. I got a grandmama sitting home, and my grandmama, 92 years old, and she eat part of this. I said, your grandmother, back in her day, she didn't have all the chemicals you had, and not only that, she walked everywhere. They used to work on Sunday, they would sweat all that out. And plus, they say that the people, the brothers and sisters, that make it over that hump, because our life expectancy is so low, if they make it over that hump, those individuals were stronger people, and they usually outlive white people. Because the oldest people in this country are what? Old black people. You see. But it was poison on top of poison. You see. And and we went home and we was talking to my cousin, I graduated from the University of South Carolina. Hey, this ain't for me. This for them brothers and sisters in the projects. I said, no, this is especially for you. This is especially for you. He said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, look, let's take a scale. You got a brother in the project. He's given nothing. He has low learning ability because the teachers don't want to teach him nothing because she think he don't know nothing. He's given nothing. He's told nothing. He sees nothing outside of his environment. If he ends up nothing, that's nothing when nothing leaves nothing. That's correct. That's mathematics. And they still defy the odds and rise up great. I said, but what about you? You go all this way, you go and you obtain all of this, and you still can't show your brother how to make $1 bill. And you can't even help this brother over here. Seems to me that's an imbalance right there. So especially you, especially you. And this is what we need to understand, that our education don't necessarily mean that we are better than our brothers and sisters. It means that we are fortunate to get a little bit of training and get us a little bit of more comfort, some VCRs and some cars and some Brooks Brothers suit. And shield our pathology. Pathology the same. It's the same as the brothers and sisters in the projects. He buying gold teeth and gold earrings and all this just to fill that void or that dehumanization he got out of slavery. and you buying all of this and spending $30,000 to get into a rich white man country club, shield your pathology. And the European shaving his face, making all this fashion, he trying to shield his pathology of being the beast. You see? Now, being the beast. We went through our barbarism. Brothers, we went through our barbarism in slavery. Slavery was orientation camp. So what this means is, some of us on the level of the beast too. What is Clarence Thomas but the doggone beast? What is Colin Powell but the beast? You see what I'm saying? Maynard Jackson did what, not this fool, put the police and the guard and all on his alma mater. Alma mater means what? Other mother. Yeah. Home away from home. He puts the beast on his alma mater. You see what I'm saying? What is that but the beast? Now, getting back to this, you have this Baal cult that the Hyksos established in Kemet. They are thrown out. You have certain people, some Asiatic people, that are still there. And they still got this little small worship of Baal. You know. Then you have the 18th and 19th dynasties, where you have the Imperial Age with Tutmosis going up, having campaigns in Europe, and they would bring back Asiatic prisoners of war. They bring these prisoners of war back, and it's not the same type, and they'd call it slavery, but it was a POW. They bring these prisoners of war back, and not only there's an incident where a POW, now our show would like to be this slave because it was an Egyptian nobleman that brought this slave back and say this slave should never be shut out of the Pharaoh's house. He should eat the same food, wear the finest clothes, and also I'm giving him my sister's daughter to marry. And I'm giving my sister's daughter my whole inheritance. Both of them, my whole inheritance. Now, if that's a slave, I sure would like to be, so they were even kind. If that's slavery, that's one of the forms of African slavery that they talk about. And you can get this part in this book, Akhenaten, the Heretic King, and all, and it goes into this part. But we're into the Imperial Egypt. And so they start bringing back these Asiatics in the 19th dynasties, 19th, 18th dynasties. And so these Asiatics start having, what they would do is they would serve out their time or whatever, and then they would say, well, hey, Kemet is the place to be. We're going to hang out in Kemet. So they would set up residency in Kemet and stay there. So you had a cult of people that started getting a little community. That was called Cosmopolitan Kemet. Now, during the time, and there is a part about Tutmosis, because this is some things that are coming in, because not only that, Seth is a god of homosexuality. He rapes Horus, or tries to. He rapes Horus, and he sticks his phallic symbol, his phallic in Horus. And Isis yells out, put your hand between your behind and catch the seed. And this would make him virile. But also, he ended up snatching Seth's testicles out. And Seth snatched his eye out in this big battle and all. But he's a god of homosexuality too. And the Asiatic, so they started going up in the Asian. You can see how this stuff started falling apart. As soon as they became an imperialistic state, this is late. Kemet is thousands of years old. Between the gods and all, if you add those up, between the gods and between the dynastic rulers, you got over 17,000 years. That's a long time. So when people say, well, you know, oh, Egypt fell, I don't want to hear nothing about Egypt, but man, my goodness, it lasted 17,000 years. And then there's a spiritual part, a cosmological heaven part that we talk about. So we're talking thousands of years. So my goodness, we've been here, what, 200 years? 215 years? I mean, as far as this being an actual, I know that America's older, but as far as this being an actual country, about 200 years bicentennial, 216 years or something like that. And it's never been nothing but chaos since we've been here. And it's built on the backs of the early Americans, the Native Americans and us. But in this Imperial Age, it started falling apart because they had a campaign. Tutmosis had a campaign to go into and to purify or to secure Kemet. And he went up into Asia, and there was an Egyptian boy that found an Asian soldier, which is another guy, and headed back to Kemet. So it's showing you that the contacts and these Asiatic people, that some of the traditions started coming into Kemet. And you had all kinds of things started happening. So now this Baal cult, this Set cult, and these people with these Asiatic ideas in this small community, before we knew it, some of these traditions were started being admired by the native Kemites or Egyptians. And some of these mythologies crept their way into the religion and all. And then they have times in some parts of the mythology that they can't explain where it came from and all. And so you have this Imperial Age where you have Akhenaten comes along. And at the time he comes along, it's the time when this stuff is getting real. He grows up in a time where they say that the old people used to say, you know, the young people don't listen to what we used to talk about. And the young people used to say, we don't want to listen to them old people singing. And they say it was a time when he grew up, when he was a young boy, that they started partying all night, staying all night, and saying, live for today, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you might die, and all of this started coming up and all. And so when this sets the climate for Akhenaten, so when he grows up, he sees a lot of things that start going on that's corrupted in the priesthood, and he said, well, I want to reform the religion. And there's a good book you can get on this, Charles Finch's new book, Echoes of the Darkland, Themes of an African Eden. It goes into the whole section on the Nile Valley sources of the Old Testament and all. So, going into what I'm getting ready to get on now. So he starts reforming Egypt. He said, well, I want to get rid of the priesthood, and I want to get rid of the royal armies, because he said, I want to be a integrationist, and I want to be a non-peace, have a non-violent campaign and all. So by him, he's thinking he's reforming the religion, and he said, well, we're going to worship the concept of one God. Now Asa Hilliard told me that he married an Asiatic woman called Nefertiti. And by going up and meeting her father, this Asiatic man gave him his concept of God. So he said, well, man, one God, that makes sense. He didn't understand that the God force was already monotheistic. So he came in to reform it and just take that out and say, we're just going to worship one God out of 10. And this God also was a God that didn't have the characteristics. And not having the characteristics of God is the ignorance of God. And the ignorance of God is the spook God. And so he tried to change this. And what happened was he later on got taken out and all and got killed, you know, because the priesthood, because they said that the invaders started invading because he got rid of the royal army and they had to take him out. You know. Later on you have Moses in the book, Moses and Monotheism by Sigmund Freud. You have Moses is so-called being a student of Akhenaten. But we don't know if he was actually a student of Akhenaten. He was a student of Akhenaten's teachings and all. Now, you have had the foreigners worshiping Set. Now, because Set is also a god that they worship, but Set is also represented as the foreigner. Set is called, that's part of him being in the pantheon is to represent the foreigner. See, they already knew that the foreigner was a child. And part of him being to represent the pantheon is, represented in the pantheon is the foreigner. You can get a book by Moritz. He's a German Egyptologist. And in this he has the whole characteristics of the gods. And Set is represented as the foreigner and as the god of foreign lands. So he's the god of foreign lands and he's the foreigner. And they knew this. Now check this out. They, in the pantheon that I gave you when I said Nut, when I said Nephthys, Isis, Osiris, Horus. No. Nephthys, Osiris, Isis, and Set. Each one of those deities have human heads. The only one that never has a human head is Set. He's the only one without a human head. He's represented as an animal all the way through. But he's represented as the fauna. So if he's represented as the fauna, the Egyptians said, hey, they're not human. And the reason why I know this, you can get the Chester Beatty Papyrus, or you can get Sir Alan Gardner's work, who translates the Chester Beatty Papyrus in the British Museum, and it says, any place above Kemet, abnormal people. And anything below Kemet, normal people. Now, I'm not sitting up here, you can get mad at me, but I'm telling you what the papyrus said, and it's all there for you to look at. And I got bibliography that can explain these things, and we could go into this, and I can give you the books that you can get. But also, in the papyrus, it says that in the Chester Beatty Papyrus of the British Museum, translated by Sir Alan Gardner, Alan H. Gardner, it says, these people are known as the miserable Asiatics. Further up north, never travel alone. Further up near the mountains, they're talking about the Caucasus Mountains, they said the water there make these people live a nomadic lifestyle. These people are murderous and quarrelsome and have an irreprehensible sex act. And not only that, in the papyrus it talks about when some of the people, when they got in the Imperial Age, some of the soldiers would be laughed at and be the butt of all jokes for coming back with Asiatic women. Now, some people might say that's mighty harsh, but we understand now, based upon we are living examples. We can look back at this and say, those brothers and sisters were right the whole time. Because he has been nothing but our enemy since the days of Horus. And like John Henry Clark said, can you name me a time in the world when black people, when the European has got along with anybody ever? If you can't name a time and you don't know where you're going now unless you know where you've been, that's telling you that, hey, you can do all you want. You can think. I would like to think that we can live harmoniously with these people. But the reality of it is that you can't. And in the papyrus, and the Egyptians knew this. It was necessary to separate Horus and Set. There's a whole part in the wall of the gods where they separated. They said, we're giving Set Asia, the outside land. It represents the desert. We're giving Set the desert, and we're giving Horus Egypt, or Kemet. And the war is called the war of the sons of light against the war of the sons of darkness. You see? And when these so-called people that they talked about conspired against Amun-Ra, and Amun-Ra represents Kemet too, and it was Horus coming back, he said that he put Horus outside of Kemet. Outside of Kemet. So this is Kemet's, you put Set outside of Kemet. This is Set's land, starting at the Sinai Peninsula, in this whole land of Asia that they talk about. And but this goes into the religious part. Now I want to bring this down because I want to show you how this thing creeps into what we are into today. This Asiatic people are in Kemet at this time. They have been there for a while. They come in with small lots, and they end up, if they were a Semitic type people, but Sheikh Anta Diop said those Semitic type people at that time was nothing but a mulatto. You see, but these mulatto people end up miscegenating with the black Africans, and they end up a group of black people, with the same skin, but not with the same nature, or not with the same origin, because they still have these worships of this so-called patriarchal deity and this so-called warlike deity, this warmonger deity. And Set is worshipped as the representative of this type of deity or this type of God concept. So what happens is, you have the time of Seti 1. And if you get the Manetho fragments, and it's good because I brought these and the people that came, you get a copy of these Manetho fragments, and before you leave you can get these fragments haven't been printed since 1876. And they're very important because it has the history of Manetho and the dynasties of Manetho, but it also goes into, in the back, the last 3 pages, it talks about Manetho and the Israelites, and his part talking about the Israelites. I don't know if is it on there? Do you have that part? Yeah, right here. It's Manetho on the, I don't know if it's a page missing or what. Fragments, course fragments. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, okay, here it is. And it talks about these people that's worshiping a cult of Set. And what happened was these people were unclean people because I think it's this community that have these Asiatic customs. And these people are unclean people and come down with leprosy. And they talk about the king at that time. I think his name is Amenephis, because I think Seti is a young boy at the time, which starts the Ramses kings. Seti 1, which Sethos, is a young boy. They say he is but a child. And anyway, what happened is they take these people and they put these people in a certain land, a certain part of Kemet that used to be the capital of the Hyksos kings. And they put these people in this land and put this section aside for these people and all. And these people worship Set, and they go on worshiping Set and all. But what happened is these people get Egyptian priest of Osiris by the name of Osiris, and who is Moses, because Manetho in his own fragments calls him Moses, or Moises, or something like that. They translated Moses. Anyway, they get, so he's over these people, and he immediately tells these people to stop worshiping the deities of Kemet also. Because even though they worship Set, they also worship the deities of Kemet, because these are regular Egyptians also. He tells them to stop worshiping the deities of Kemet and to destroy all the animals of Kemet, the animals that represent these deities. And so these people get a campaign up to go and to start warring against Kemet. What they want to do is they go and contact their brothers and sisters, or so-called ancestors, that's over in, not the ancestors, the brothers and sisters that's over in Palestine, which were the Hyksos people that were kicked out years ago. And they go and try to contact them so they can get leverage in a war against Kemet. But what happened is, these people, you have the king, he goes down, the king of Kemet at this time goes down into Nubia and gets his reinforcement from Nubia. And they come back and they kick these people out. This is the origin of the Exodus, because we know that there was no Exodus in Kemet at all. There's no records of an Exodus of 80,000 people leaving a particular area and all. There was no Exodus. So this is the origin of the Exodus. The point I want to make here is getting into this part. About 700 years later, Charles Finch tells me, about 700 years later, you get this Exodus story about the evil Pharaoh and the whole thing written in the so-called books of Moses, of the Torah, about 700 years ago. Now the argument is, well, even though those people were kicked out, that you can't say that those people, that people was Moses, and you can't say that those people were the actual people that we worship under today. But in this fragment, Manetho calls him Moses. Now, that's a hell of a coincidence that the people in the Exodus called Moses, that's not by coincidence. Because the brother was trying to tell me, one brother was trying to tell me that he was a priest of Osiris doesn't necessarily mean it was Moses, because Moses was a righteous person. And his brother was an Islamic brother, and he was saying because Moses is a fundamental deity in the Quran, along with Jesus, along with Abraham, and this family, this Asiatic family, is also the Quran is nothing but a second version of an Asiatic family going to Muhammad. So he said, look, that you can't prove that. I said, well, look, that's a hell of a coincidence. They reverse a story and give you this whole thing about people being enslaved and left. And it's almost identical if you reverse it back this way to a people that were kicked out and had this priest. And the priest being learned in all of the science of the Egyptians. They're talking about the same people. Even though we know that 700 years later, the people who translated this were different. But it's the same people. Now the other point to this is, what are the characteristics? You can't necessarily say that that's the characteristics of what we are. But I just explained that the God concept that we worship today is a God concept that favors the Asiatics, not necessarily the Egyptians. Because the Egyptians, we understand that we have the things that came out of there that give the Asiatic story. Where you have the story of Horus and the whole thing with Cain and Abel and the whole thing with Horus and all going on up into this part and the different concepts that give the story. But the deity concepts, they worship this one God with no characteristics. Oh, he's just God. You see, he has no characteristics. No characteristics of nature, no characteristics of the heaven, no characteristics of the stars, no characteristics of anything. You see, he's just there and you don't even supposed to question him. You see, so now we see that this characteristics is altogether different. You see, now that goes into the actual mythology of the Hebrews. And the Hebrew mythology is Set somehow is turned around from the evil god becomes a spook god. Some spook devil under the ground with red tights on and all of this stuff, right? But if it's not the same, how the devil is Set now becomes the third son of Adam. Set is the third son of Adam. He ends up in the Bible. Isn't that something? Now, they got this in Greek myths. You can get Greek myth by Robert Graves here. It talks about Set, the third son after Cain and Abel, and Cain killed Abel, and the people of Canaan are supposed to be represented as Cain. You have Set that is born. He said, well, this is what it is. Now check how this is some patriarchal bull jive, and it just doesn't make any sense. Now listen to this. It says that after Eve had Cain and Abel, that Adam didn't sleep with Eve until 130 years later. He didn't sleep with Eve until 130 years later, until God told him, you need to make love to her so she can bore you another son, and we can get the family going of the world in the Adam and Eve thing, right? So it didn't sleep with Eve till 130 years later. And they had Set. Now, before Eve dies, now check this out, before Eve dies, Eve so-called gets hot and wants a man. This is in the faith. You can read it for yourself in Hebrews, in the Hebrew myth, Robert Graves. She so-called wants a man, and to satisfy her love, he asked God, and God said, go ahead and make love to her again and all, and then she bore him before she dies 30 sets of twins. Now, 30 sets of twins. And these twins, so-called, of the people that so-called populated the earth. Now, Set lives Adam lives 800 years after the birth of Set. So that means what? He's over 1,000 years old. And all Adam. And Eve dies she dies early. I guess a regular life or whatever. She dies early. But ain't that funny, because we know even in Kemet that some of the males did outlive the females, even in those times when the males were living to be 100 and all. But anyway, we get to the point. It's supposed to be these kids. These kids are the kids of you have the kids of Cain, because Cain, so-called, after he killed he killed Abe, he went off and he had kids. And how he had kids, I don't understand. How can Cain had kids and there ain't no people on the earth, and the only people are the people that Seth brings forth or whatever? And how can he have kids? But then again, they said they had 30 twins. But check this out. So the people of Cain are the sinful women. There's unclean and sinful women. And the people of Seth are the righteous men. And one day the sinful women get husband hungry. And they go to house snatching up men. And they go in and break in on the men of Seth and seduce them. And the men of Seth become filthy as dogs. See how the respect for the woman is reversed? Reversed all the way, just turned around, where you have the world's great mother, that is the birth of all humanity, and all of a sudden she comes from the world's great mother, she turns into the great deceiver in the book of Genesis, because she tricked Adam into having apple, eat back the apple and all, and say, like Wade Noble says, God said, "What you doing? Why did you give him that apple? When you eat the apple, didn't I tell you not to do that?" And Adam said, "Oh, she gave it to me." And Adam said she gave it to me. You see, and for her punishment, she's supposed to bear the child labor and all of this type of stupid stuff. You see, for her punishment and all. But she's the great deceiver in the Genesis, and all of a sudden she's the great whore in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 5 through 7. She's the great mother is a great abomination, you see, with the blood.